It's the Fantasy Football Hustle. Welcome in, everybody. Thanks for joining us again. We've reached the end of the first round of the 2020 NFL Draft. Brian Drake, alongside Establish the Run's Dwain McFarland, and we have a special guest. Jay Moyer joins us because we're talking running backs for the first time here in the evening. Jay, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing well, man. It was nice to have a little bit of, live sporting event. Not obviously them playing on the field, but some new sports content to digest. And, my boy, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, first running back off the board. So I had to hop on here with you guys. Real excited to talk some football.
Yeah, so let's get into Edwards-Helaire. He goes 32nd overall to the Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs. Obviously, he's an LSU kid. He is a guy who everyone is so excited about because he catches the ball so well. Last year, he lined up at wide receiver, if you can believe this, 26% of the time, ran a 4.61 40. He's a short guy, though, 5'7", 207, little bowling ball-esque, really good hands, elusive. What I like about him for the next level is he's only going up against my, sometime on and off boyfriend, Damian Williams, but they're going to face super light boxes. They're going to have the lead. They got an imaginative play caller. In my mind, there's no question he is the number one dynasty draft rookie off the board from the running back position. I don't even think it's going to be close. But I'd love to get you guys your opinion. Jay, you're a guest. Let's start with you.
Yeah, Clyde Edwards-Helaire was somewhat my sleeper going into this draft. Obviously, now that he's in Kansas City, that all changes. Like you said, he'll most likely end up being the consensus number one guy at the running back position. Real dynamic player when you talk about his receiving skill set. He ran a ton of option routes at LSU where he has two-way goes against linebackers, and he's really uncoverable in those types of situations. Once he gets the ball in his hands in the open field, he can beat you multiple ways. He has a really lethal spin move. There's an option route against Alabama that I highlighted on my Twitter feed, where he catches the ball. A linebacker's coming across the middle to hit him, and he hits a spin move behind him, gets upfield. And so really impressive array of moves, nice stiff arm, real lightning quick. And then really I think what's underrated about him is his ability as a runner between the tackles. Probably the most pro-ready prospect, in my opinion, in terms of being able to execute common pro running schemes, inside zone, duo, run schemes that are very common in the pros that LSU ran for the vast majority of their rushing offense. And really, he's excellent at reading and manipulating the second level. I think that's probably the area where he offers the biggest upgrade over Damian Williams, who is a really good receiver, but isn't quite as refined as a between the tackles runner. So I think, it's an excellent fit in Kansas City. I'm sure Andy Reid saw a little bit of Brian Westbrook in Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and their offense. These guys are loaded. So, obviously you want anybody that's a part of that offense, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire is going to be playing a big part.
Dwayne, what do you see with this scheme? And can he come in right away and take a big role away from Damian Williams, who should have been the Super Bowl MVP? I will say that.
Yeah, I think he can. I'm just excited. I was excited to get Jay on just because Jay and I, we talked, before the draft today, and I was like, all right. And I told him our plan tonight, Drake. And I was like, and he was like, well, I got my dad and my brother coming over. And I was like, well, just name a couple players that if they got taken in the first round, that you would just go ahead and pop on. And like the first name out of his mouth was Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So Jay's been pumping this guy up since a couple months ago. So if you're not following, Jay on Twitter, you need to make sure that you are at Jay Moyer FB, and you'll see plenty of great breakdowns, not just of Helaire, but of several guys. But back to your question, Drake. Yeah, just for the reasons that Jay was just saying, and Matt echoed some of the same things when I've talked to him about Helaire is, the guy has really good vision. He can handle both kind of schemes, whether it's power or whether it is a zone type of scheme. He's just somebody that just has it all together. He's one of those guys. He sees it, his body reacts. And as far as what Jay was talking about as a receiver out of the backfield, that's something Matt talked about as well. with us, he said, he really liked Swift, a lot as a receiver, but he thought, Helaire just as a route runner, right, was, probably the best. Maybe he didn't have the best hands of all the backs, but as far as being somebody that could just leave somebody, from a route running perspective, like in a mismatch against a linebacker or a safety. So yeah, man, I think it's awesome. You pair him up with a guy like Andy Reid. I love the idea of Westbrook.
It's a perfect comparison. He's like a more athletic Brian Westbrook.
Yeah, and
Brian Westbrook is one of my favorite Eagles of all time.
And remember, Westbrook also didn't have like that huge top end speed, but it didn't matter. I mean, he could do everything at all the other levels, and he still broke really big plays. So, yeah, man, I think he's easily going to be the top dynasty pick. We'll see where some of these other guys land, but I mean, once you factor in that, the Chiefs spent a first round pick on him, you look at the offense that he's on, man, people's imaginations are just going to run wild. And this is one case where your imagination probably should run wild. You get to play with Patrick Mahomes and Tyreek Hill, and you got a coach like Andy Reid. I mean, we were excited about the Cowboys pick earlier, because
you were excited about the Cowboys pick earlier.
Well, you were sad, but you knew that it was, it's going to be a good thing for their offense. But I mean, think of all I didn't even mention Travis Kelce. Like, they can attack every part of the field. They can, they can really stress defenses out, and then they have the best quarterback in the league. So yeah, I mean, what a great pick to end on. What a great pick to end on for round one. Probably the most relevant fantasy pick of the first round, as far as fantasy players, are concerned.
And Jay, let's go back to you. And when is this guy ever going to see an 8-man box? When is he ever going to see, a situation where our teams are keying on him with Tyreek Hill, with Kelce, with the 7,000 other receivers they have, and Patrick Mahomes, excuse me. I was reading a stat earlier. I believe he has like the number one adjusted completion quarterback rating to running backs in the NFL. So he's fantastic in getting the ball to running backs. So it just, everything adds up. So everything we loved about Damian Williams a year ago of like, oh, look, he's in this offense, they're going to give him the ball, and just because he's there, he's fantasy relevant. F him out the window now. It's all Clyde Edwards-Helaire. In redraft even. I mean, this guy's going to be a second or third round pick in redraft now. I'm not trying to get over dramatic here with him, but
people will get excited. He's going to move up. Like, I think Reed's still going to use a couple of guys. And let's ask Jay on this. Jay, you've watched him more than anybody. I think one of the keys for Helaire will be, what does his pass blocking look like? I mean, because you're not going to be in a route every play. There are times, when you're going to have to be protecting Patrick Mahomes, which is obviously the biggest asset for the Chiefs. So what are your thoughts on, his skill set, as a pass blocker?
Yeah. While we were talking and while you guys were talking about Damian Williams, I was going to hop on and pump the brakes a little bit. I think the excitement for Clyde is more than justified, and really excited about his potential as a playmaker in the offense. But we saw last year with LaShawn McCoy that his struggles picking up the pass blocking scheme led to a situation where the second half of the season he was inactive more often than not. And Damian Williams probably or potentially his biggest strength as a player is really his pass blocking. He's really solid in pass pro. So I don't think that he's going to be, completely shoved off to the side for Clyde. There will probably be a situation where both guys are seeing some reps, at least in the first year. At LSU, CEH was really just not asked to pass block often. He was out in routes the vast majority of the time they're passing. You mentioned he lined up split out wide about a quarter of the time. And really, even when he was in the backfield, he was often doing either quick check releases or designated routes from the backfield. So it really wasn't a big part of his job. I think his issues with pass blocking are not really related to a lack of understanding or awareness in the pass blocking scheme, but more just issues with technique. He was often trying to cut players and didn't have great technique with his cut blocks. So I imagine that would be something he can improve on with focused coaching. I mean, the guy really, the things he was asked to do often really executed at a high level. And I think that's one of the reasons he's easy to project to the NFL is because his execution as a receiver and in the running game, executing the scheme was really, really top notch. So for me, I am confident he'll be able to pick it up if that's something he's asked to do, just because the things that he's asked to do often, he does at such a high level. And this is a guy who was a captain. He was chosen team MVP of LSU, believe it or not, above, Joe Burrow, the #1 pick, Heisman Trophy winner. So obviously a guy that his teammates respected, his coaches respected. For me, it's a home run pick. I think that he's going to have a huge impact in Kansas City. High octane offense. Couldn't really ask for a better situation for any running back. So,
Well, we've got you here, Jay. Anything else from the first round stand out to you?
Interesting run on receivers. A lot of guys taken. I have an affinity for Denzel Mims. I think that he's really, a dynamic player. Obviously, good size, excellent speed, really polished. I see him as a slightly lighter, slightly less strong version of Josh Gordon in terms of what he can bring as a player.
Should have been a Green Bay Packer. Let's be honest.
Yeah, that Jordan Love pick was a head scratcher. Not a big fan of Jordan Love in general, especially when you're drafting him when you have Aaron Rodgers, who,
makes no sense.
You'd like to see them build around a little bit and make a run, but we'll see what happens. Mims likely will go in the second round. I'm interested to see where he ends up. I do think the Cowboys adding CD Lamb really, becomes one of the best receiving cores in the NFL when you talk about adding him to Amari Cooper and Michael Gallup.
You hear that, Drake? The Dallas Cowboys. I don't even think the Eagles can cover one of those receivers.
We got Darius Slay now. We have one legit corner. We'll draft another one this weekend.
True. You do.
There must have been a train going by in the background, and I missed the rest of that. But
and then the Raiders, drafting Ruggs as the first receiver off the board. I'm not a fan of the pick at all. I think Ruggs is a useful player, but more useful if you have a true #1, possession type receiver, someone like the Saints or the Broncos, with Michael Thomas or Cortland Sutton, a guy who can move the chains, and then you're using Ruggs to, divert a little bit of attention, take the top off the defense. For me, when I watch him at Alabama, I don't see a guy who can really function as a #1 receiver without significantly more development in areas that are hard to improve on, things like tracking the ball, his route running, his route breaks, just sort of his understanding of the scheme and timing on his routes. He just wasn't a guy that the quarterbacks on Alabama were looking to get the ball, which is really sort of eyebrow raising when you think about his physical talent and his ability to catch the ball when it's thrown to him. So for me, with the Raiders, when they're really looking for a #1 type guy, they already have that field stretcher with Tyrell Williams. It was, really a bit of a redundant pick in that sense. And I would have liked to have seen a guy like Lamb in, I guess it's Las Vegas now, unfortunately for myself, a guy who grew up in Oakland. But those are my main thoughts, I guess.
That's cool. We're going to have some more of Jay, hopefully tomorrow, out in the Bay Area. We'll get him back out in the car and we'll have him. Yeah, that's got to be your podcast. It's got to be just like From the Back Seat with Jay Moyer.
Yeah, man, I got a couple young kids. The house is small. I can't get too excited about my boy Clyde Edwards-Helaire when I'm inside and the kid, the 3-year-old and the 1-year-old are sleeping. So I get booted out to the car so I can raise my voice a little bit.
I'm sure my wife is furious with me that I've been sitting down here all night talking NFL draft with Dwain. But hey, that's what we do. We love fantasy football. We love talking about it. We love doing it here in the first round. So Dwain McFarland, Jay Moore, thank you, gentlemen, so much. It's been a very intriguing evening, and hopefully we're right back at it tomorrow and we do a little more here for the Fantasy Football Hustle. Take it easy, folks. Have a good night.